Jeremy Sports Network coming to you live. How you guys doing on today? We are coming off a Super Bowl Sunday that had to be one of the greatest to ever take place in my 29 years of living. This is probably one of the best Super Bowls I've ever seen in my life. But the main thing today is we want to talk about what's next for the Atlanta Falcons. I know a lot of Falcons fans probably don't even care right now, but these are some key important things that are going to take place if you want your team to make it to the championship game again with the possibility of winning it all. And what's crazy is a lot of things are about to take place now in Atlanta. You're moving into a new stadium. You just lost your offensive coordinator. But what's good is the fact that Atlanta doesn't have to worry about paying anybody right now because you have Julio wrapped up already with his contract. Matt Ryan's hooked up already with his contract. You have Devontae Freeman, who you can go ahead and sign an extension if you do want to give him an extension. But Atlanta really doesn't have any big problems to worry about. Now, what they do have to worry about is finding an offensive coordinator who was just as good or can keep the same system that Kyle Shanahan had in order for Matt Ryan to keep flourishing throughout the offense. I mean, we already know that the next few days is going to be crazy in the NFL in regards to coaching interviews and many owners embarking on searches and changes that they want to do in order to help make their team better. But it takes more than a head coach to change a culture and turn a team around, and the total staff matters most. You don't want to underestimate the importance of top coordinators like Kyle Shanahan, because Kyle Shanahan, even though he had some iffy plays in a Super Bowl, let's not get it twisted here. He had one of the best offenses that played in the NFL this year, putting up over 540 points this year. You had a quarterback who threw 13 touchdown passes, more than 13 touchdown passes, but he threw a touchdown pass to 13 different receivers. You had a running game with two running backs, great running backs in Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman. You picked up Mohamed Sanu. Your defense started three rookies that were young, but they play with speed. They play fast. They're hungry. So trying to find somebody who can make that team better, man, you kind of don't know what's out there right now. We have Mike McCoy. He'll be coveted as a coordinator again now that he's out in San Diego after going 27-37 in 4 seasons. His work with quarterbacks of all shapes and sizes is well documented now. Mike McCoy is a great offensive coordinator, but will he be in Atlanta? That remains to be seen. I'm hearing things that North Turner, he's feeling good and energized after his early season fallout with the Vikings. He's open to opportunities that may present themselves. We have Tom Clements. He's a longtime assistant to Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. He has an expiring contract and should be on many owners' lists as far as bringing him in as an offensive coordinator. You have Greg Olsen. And we all know Greg Olsen was pretty much a scapegoat for Blake Bortles' failures that he had in Jacksonville, getting fired mid-season. But he would be primed for a reboot in Atlanta if that job presented himself for him. Now, Brad Childress, I'm really not sure about Brad Childress going to Atlanta because even though he's a key part of Andy Reid's staff in Kansas City as the co-offensive coordinator, but I can't help but wonder if his longtime friend would let him move on for a lateral move if the opportunity presented itself. Like, let's just be real. And with Brad Childress, even though he's not calling the plays, I still see Andy Reid controlling that offense. I really don't see anything that Brad Childress did in order to propel himself to be in position for the Atlanta job. I really don't know. And then you have Chip Kelly. Like, Chip Kelly, there's so much to say about this guy. I mean, he's the person who could frankly do the most potential rehab his image right now as a top schemer and play caller, but his image as a top schemer and play caller, to me, is nonetheless subpar average. I would say for Chip Kelly, I don't really see Chip Kelly doing anything good in the NFL. I'd rather him go back to college and do things in college than do anything in regards to the NFL. Because Chip Kelly, he's not good. He's not a good head coach. When he was a head coach in Philly, all he did in Philly was get rid of all the best players that Philadelphia had. Period. Then you go to San Francisco and you have a losing year in San Francisco. And then you're thinking you're finna come to Atlanta, a team that already made it to the Super Bowl, who had one of the best offensive years in Atlanta history, and you think you're going to come in and make them better. I don't see that happening. But the bottom line is there are plenty of qualified candidates who could be pursued at the coordinator level as soon as possible, while other teams are trying to rebuild their entire staffs as part of a head coaching process is concerned. But with Atlanta, I want to go to their roster. Let's go to their roster because this is important. Atlanta finished 11-5 this year in their division. Tampa Bay was not far behind Atlanta, finishing at 9-7. But we all know that Tampa Bay has to get better in order to become NFC champions, and I don't see them doing anything as of right now to put themselves in position to say, okay, we know they're going to overtake Atlanta. Or we know Carolina could overtake Atlanta. Or New Orleans can overtake Atlanta. I still see Atlanta winning the division again. And I see them reaching the NFC championship again. But when we look at this roster, and I'm going to name a few of the guys who started last night and who made a difference last night. Number one, Robert Alford. Robert Alford played a great game last night. Although he was beat on some plays, he did have the pick six, but Robert Alford is a great player for the Atlanta Falcons, and he's not going anywhere. Ricardo Allen was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. This was his second year coming out of Purdue, but Ricardo Allen has grown into a good safety for Atlanta. Although he did lack the experience, but Ricardo Allen played really good in the Super Bowl. And once we continue to go down this roster, you have Jonathan Babineau, who's been there 12 years. I think you get rid of Jonathan Babineau, who's been there for 12 years at defensive tackle, and you have to get depth on your defensive line and linebacker position. And that's what hurt Atlanta last night, is the fact that they didn't have any depth in key positions as far as getting after the quarterback with your defensive line and linebackers. Now Vic Beasley, sack leader. I mean, I didn't see Vic Beasley stand out to me in this game against New England because they made him irrelevant. I seen one play that Vic Beasley had, and that was, I believe he was guarding Martellus Bennett, but Bennett ended up dropping the touchdown pass in the end zone. But other than that, Vic Beasley really wasn't a factor in getting after Matt Ryan. I mean, getting after Tom Brady. And that's the crazy thing about it. And then once we continue to go down the list, I mean, Devondre Campbell had a great year this year as a rookie. And the fact that you still have him, at outside linebacker, Devondre Campbell is going to be a stud for the Atlanta Falcons. So he's not going anywhere. Tevin Coleman's not going anywhere. Jalen Collins out of LSU. Jalen Collins had a monster year this year playing. But I'm not going to sit here and say these guys can't play football because they gave up a 25-point lead to Tom Brady. It's more so of the coaching and not being able to put your players in a position to win. If you go man to man throughout the whole game and you having a safety coming to play into the middle of coming down to play in the middle of the field to guard those out routes and slants and inside routes. That's how Robert Arthur was able to catch that pick six and take it to the house. Dan Quinn did not make the right adjustments defensively in order for Atlanta to win the ball game against Tom Brady. Dan Quinn made the same mistakes and did the same thing that he did 2 years ago in Super Bowl 49 against Tom Brady when he had the Legion of Boom defense and he played man-to-man throughout that whole fourth quarter and Tom Brady walked the ball down the field and the rest is history. So Jalen Collins is a great player for Atlanta. I don't see him going anywhere. Tom Compton on that offensive line. The offensive line itself for Atlanta was really good with the addition of Alex Mack coming in. I believe Alex Mack made a hell of a difference and took a lot of the pressure off of Matt Ryan, having Alex Mack there at the center position. Even though Alex Mack did give up a big play last night by allowing Matt Ryan to be sacked by Trey Flowers towards the end of the game when they could have kicked the field goal to win the ball game. I still feel as though Alex Mack addition put Atlanta in a position in order for them to win a division again next year. Now, you're going to be losing guys like Dwight Freeney, like I said, getting the older guys out of the way, the seasoned guys out the way. You still have some key guys in Rashid Hageman, who was that? Grady Jarrett last night, who had a monster game after getting after Tom Brady out of Clemson. If you build that defensive line in Atlanta and get some depth with your defensive line and your outside linebacker position and middle linebacker position, Atlanta has no problems or no holes whatsoever. I don't see any holes whatsoever. When you look at this roster now, you see young, talented players on this roster. Young, talented players on this roster. Nobody is past that 10-year mark. And those that are past the 10-year mark are going to be gone from this team on next year. That's Dwight Freeney, Matt Schaub. I heard Matt Schaub is supposed to be going with Kyle Shanahan to San Francisco. So Matt Schaub could be the potential starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers with Kyle Shanahan going there as their new head coach until he drafts a quarterback. So right there, Atlanta is a very young team who has the opportunity to put themselves in a position to make it back to the Super Bowl. So once they make those key changes and bring in depth on that defensive line and those outside linebacker positions and those linebacker positions, and if people asking me, well, why the linebacker position when we have Deion Jones and those boys at linebacker? Well, if you saw how those boys was able to lose this game, it was because the lack of depth. These guys was tired after Tom Brady exposed them offensively. They showed their hand and they never did make the adjustments. And Tom Brady, all he did was throw the ball where the receiver was open. And that was it. James White dominated the game. The outside linebackers, when they went man-to-man and said that they were going to put a linebacker on James White and they had to cover James White shredded them for 14 catches, 110 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's the same thing that happened to the Seattle Seahawks in Super Bowl 49 when they played against Tom Brady. And Tom Brady did the same thing against a Dan Quinn defense. And Shane Vereen was highlighted in that game with a lot of catches that he had in Super Bowl 49. So Tom Brady already knew what to do against this defense. But given the fact this defense is young, they play fast. They are smart. They're not dumb. They do what they supposed to do. I see Atlanta, man, making it back. You have your great depth at the cornerback position. You have great depths at safety with Keon O'Neal and those boys. Um, I still think that they can get better on the offensive side of the ball as well. A lot of people want to say, well, they have the best offense in the game, but you still can get better. What can you do to get better? Maybe you bring in another veteran tight end. Even though you have two young tight ends, but I still feel as though those two young tight ends are not as good if you bring in a veteran who's been there, done that before. So when you think about that, that makes you sit here and wonder, like, man, who can that who teams now, players now are going to want to come and play with Atlanta because they're young, they have a great team. So you won't have a problem with finding seasoned veterans in order to come and play with Atlanta. The thing is Atlanta going to put themselves in position in order to bring those players in? Now, Dan Quinn, if we look at the roster changes that took place throughout this year for Atlanta, man, Dan Quinn did make the right decisions on who to bring in and who to play. I kid you not, I didn't know anything about Taylor Gabriel until this year. Blew on the scene for me this year, didn't know anything about him. Justin Hardy, didn't know anything about him until this year. Just watching these guys play this year, you started to see them progress. Like I said, I knew about Jalen Collins coming out of LSU. You know about Grady Jarrett coming out of Clemson, Vic Beasley out of Clemson. Like those guys played with each other in college, so it made it all the more better for that camaraderie to take place in that locker room. You don't want to bring anybody in that is going to hurt this locker room because I think this is a close bunch. Even though these guys did lose the big one, but they remained together. You didn't see anybody calling anybody out or anybody trying to go after a certain teammate because they may have not done their job like they were supposed to do. But man, Atlanta is going to be good next year. If they can get over this hangover and buckle down and get to work and do the same thing that they did on this past year, they do it next year. Atlanta has no problem with making it to the Super Bowl and winning it all. They have no problem with that. Atlanta is my pick to make it to the Super Bowl on next year. They are my pick. Because I'm looking at this roster and I'm going down this roster and I'm like, man, like they add some players for special teams and they add some rotation to that defensive line and linebacker position. Atlanta, they will be a force to be reckoned with. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these guys do the necessary things in order to put themselves in a position to win. You guys have to understand, if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan, for you to make it to the Super Bowl with this young roster that you have, you accomplished a lot. Matt Ryan, like I said, don't owe the Atlanta Falcons anything because Matt Ryan proved himself and shown himself worthy to remain a starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. I hear a lot of Atlanta Falcons fans, oh, we still need to get a quarterback, and Matt Ryan, he just reverted back to his old ways. No, Matt Ryan did what Matt Ryan had did all year long. Although those plays were iffy towards the end, but Matt Ryan did what Matt Ryan did all year long. You didn't have a problem with them when they went up 28-3 on New England. You didn't have a problem with them then. So how come all of a sudden you want to get rid of them after you end up losing the ball game to the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl after giving up 25 points? I don't want to get rid of this core that I have right now with the Atlanta Falcons because Atlanta can put themselves in position to be great if they do the small things. And I think what's highlighted right now is first thing first, we need to go after a good offensive coordinator who's going to keep the same offense intact for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and Devontae Freeman and those guys so that they can be able to still flourish in the system. They know the system and they still can be comfortable. So when they come into next year, nothing is new. There's no new schemes. There's no new what would you call it? Not scheme, but not schematics, but verbiage. There's no new language. There's no nothing. They can just go out and perform like they did this year. And this year, that was one thing that was good with Atlanta. They were able to go out and perform with no worries. Now next year, with all the pressure being on Atlanta after having a good year this year, a lot of teams are going to have your number. And that's, can Atlanta uh, uphold themselves and not have a Super Bowl hangover, and they come out strong and defend the NFC, because a lot of teams are going to come after them like they did Carolina. A lot of teams came after Carolina this year because Carolina showed arrogancy in playing in the Super Bowl. They were very arrogant on this past year. I mean, last year. Very arrogant. And the same thing with Atlanta. Atlanta had a little bit of arrogancy, and they were very Lord, I can't even get it right. They were very arrogant. I should say they were very arrogant in the Super Bowl, the game that mattered most, when all you had to do was run the ball after Julio had the tiptoe catch on the sideline with 3 minutes to go in the ball game, where it could put you in a position to go up 11 and put the game out of reach. Trying to pass the ball and be aggressive like that was what hurt Atlanta. Being arrogant and not really focusing and playing situational football. Situational football is what mattered most. And that's the reason why Atlanta was losing that game, and they lost that game eventually because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't take care of their responsibilities. They didn't make those the key adjustments in order to put themselves in a position to win. They didn't do that, and it hurt them this year. But next year, man, you look at that roster. Like I told you, they have a great roster, great young core. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Atlanta is going to do. But I'm very concerned about what they're going to do with not having an offensive coordinator. But I do not want them to go after a Chip Kelly. I'd rather them have North Turner, okay, than a Chip Kelly. And being honest, I heard that Mike Nolan, Atlanta Falcons fans, if you all do remember Mike Nolan, he was your defensive coordinator. I heard Mike Nolan is re-energized to come back to the NFL. Not saying he's going to come to the Atlanta Falcons, but Mike Nolan is thinking about making a return back into the NFL after having a year off. So that is good for Mike Nolan. But for the city of Atlanta, like I said, although, they did lose on this past evening, hey, it's okay, man. You guys got to keep your head up and trust in your team and believe that they're going to make the right adjustments in order to put you all back in a position of winning the Super Bowl again in Super Bowl 52. I do believe Atlanta can make it back there again. I do believe they have a great head coach in Dan Quinn, who is not going to take anything away from what it is that they did good. All he's going to do is make them better, and Dan Quinn is the type of head coach who is going to do that. Atlanta, you should believe in Dan Quinn. You need to believe in Matt Ryan. You need to believe in Thomas Dimitroff. You need to constantly believe in Arthur Blank. These guys are great guys who wants to help this team win. And I really do appreciate the Atlanta Falcons for giving us a great year this year. Hands down, you guys did an awesome job. Sorry you came up short in the Super Bowl, but hey, it's only going to get better. This is Jeremy Sports Network. I'm signing out. Peace.